Well, this is the first mansion we're seeing. We got here yesterday, and all I can say is the street signs and everything in this area, they're nothing like they are in California. So it was about 11:30 when we finally got to our spot. But now we're looking at the Berkeley and Harrison Landing and the Berkeley Plantation. Since we don't have Ann and George, our rocket that we're using to look at all this stuff is a Ford Fusion. It's not bad. I don't think I'd drive it all the time. Oh, looks like a big old cannonball. This is part of their monuments, and they're really into boxwood hedges.
Plantation, and we are the home of the first Thanksgiving, as you'll see when you get inside to see the movie. If we were in England, we said Berkeley, because there's a Berkeley Castle and a Berkeley Square, and they said Berkeley instead of saying Berkeley. So we go say Berkeley. 1691, Benjamin Harrison III came over with a land grant to raise tobacco, build ships, and export it back to England. He did that for a number of years, and then his son Benjamin IV decided he wanted to establish a home. So he went back to Dallas prison to see who he could get to help him build a house. He ran into Rob Wilson. Rob Wilson was a shipbuilder, a Scotsman, but he was in prison because he hadn't paid his bills. So Benjamin said, that'll be the fellow for me, because our slaves actually built the house that we're going to be touring, and Rob was going to supervise, of course. Now, what they built was a Georgia-style, evenly balanced, 3-story brick home, the oldest one of its type in the state of Virginia today. The brick were made here on a plantation by the slaves, of course. It was built by the slaves, and the floors inside a pine. And in Virginia, we call that pine trees loblolly. Our slaves would have lived back towards the east where the tobacco fields were, where our fields are. Their homes would have been 4 walls, a dirt floor, and a fireplace. And we would have kept them clothed and fed, of course. So that's where they would have been back in there. Now, they built this cottage and the other cottage at the same time they were building on their house. Both of them were brick, but they stuccoed these two buildings so that they would hold up, and then they'd fix the brick on that one. Now, this cottage was used as a guest cottage if we had too many guests in the house, and if we didn't have too many in there. We had too many now, they could come over here and sleep over here in a guest cottage. And if nobody was using the guest cottage, we could the bachelors would enjoy using it a whole lot because they would come over here and enjoy that. The bachelors would use it then. So now, that's about it for here. Welcome and where you are in my laundry room. We always built our kitchens away from the house because we didn't want our kitchens to catch on fire. Because we kept the fire going 24/7. Because back in those days, that little thing called a match had not been invented. Over here we have a sign that says, Whistle Walk on Tunnel. And it went through the tunnel she made them whistle. Because she knew if they were whistling, they would be eating her food. Over top of the door is H for Harrison. Benjamin loves Anne in 1726. Now Benjamin married with Anne Carter, and Anne Carter's father was Robert King Carter, a very powerful plantation owner and tobacco grower associated with Shirley Plantation next door. And when they got the families together, they had a lot of families together. It made a big family. Now we're getting ready to go down to the basement. Now all sunglasses need to come off. And if you're wearing glasses at change, make sure you hold tight to my railings because you're going to hit a dark spot. And they're not going to change as quick as you think they'll, so that's the reason I tell you all to hold on tight, okay?
That was fun.
Are you from Milwaukee?
Yeah.
Okay. From Woodland, Wisconsin.
What job you make?
Look, New York. Now this is Shirley Plantation we're going to see. What a view.
Did you hear that, Margo? 47 steps.
Interest in the plantation, come to the control of others, and it was a Captain Edward Hill that comes to the plantation and builds the first house here. It was a very unpretentious wooden house, and it was the Hill family that would have contended with the two Indian massacres in Virginia in 1722 and in 1622 and 1643. 3 generations of Hills live in that original house before this one was ever thought of. Now this house dates from 1738. Inside we'll tell you how we get up to the beginning of it and so forth. But it took 15 years to build this whole plantation. All 15 of these buildings were built at the same time, including two others that your brochure refers to as being flankers. Two other buildings that stood here on either side of the house, never connected to the house. This one was struck by lightning and burned in 1820. And 50 years later, they dismantled the one here intentionally and used all the building materials elsewhere. These were very practical with 6 additional bedrooms each. They were 2.5 stories tall and built in the style of the house itself. So it was very imposing from the perspective of the river. We would ask that you refrain from leaning on the furniture or touching it. And also, we're sorry we cannot permit any photography or video recording in the house. And we would ask you to turn off your telephones at this time.
This is the backyard of where we're staying, and as you can tell, it's Thursday and it's raining. So we've decided to wait to see Williamsburg. Yeah, this is definitely not the time for us to be out and about. Some nice books. It's sprinkling, but not as bad as it was before. So we're going to go over Williamsburg, get ourselves our tickets to see Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. And of course, there's our silver bullet. Well, we've decided on this rainy day, we got our tickets for a week so we can do whatever we want, and we're going to take the bus just to have it bring us around Colonial Williamsburg.
Go right over there to Exodus, and I'll sit here. I'm happy to
area that we are in, and on the other side, a list of the scenes that you shall encounter. And of course today, my friends, is the collapse of the royal government, beginning in 1765. And as you look down to the left, you shall see the times of the scenes given to you, the date in history and a description of the scene, and most importantly, the location of the scene. So as you traverse, my friends, and if you feel a bit out of sorts, feel free to not only consult your handbills, but of course also to ask someone who is dressed like myself, Mr. Murray or Mistress Mitchell. We shall all be very glad to help you today. Now, my friends, this is a time of great celebration. It is a time where you shall encounter many different kinds of people. You shall not only encounter the fine gentlemen who are here, who are very upset about what's happening in 1765, the Stamp Act and the Stamp Tax. You shall be encountering middling sorts of people, those with businesses, worried about the impact upon that. Servants and slaves as well. And you shall also be encountering none other than the royal governor himself. So it's very important, my friends, for you to know how to properly deport yourselves here in the 18th century. We defy, and with the approach of the royal governor to Revolutionary City. Huzzah!
Here comes the horse.
God save the king! Oh, here he comes! You're coming to park here. Y'all showed you the proper respect, you know?
I say God save the king.
We'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3. God save the king!
He made that big speech last May. Bees have been swarming ever since, and now they're looking to sting. Oh no! You're not about ready to tell that speech again, are you? What is gonna make about 100 times? Say it happened right there in that Capitol building. Never seen anything before like it. All those Burgess men sitting there, wringing their hands, saying, "What are we to do about this stamp tax?" Oh!
Pay close heed. 16th night of December last, 1773, in the port of Boston, in the King's colony of Massachusetts, traitors men, disguised as wild Indians, leading the dead on night board ships of the East.
Complaint of America, not Massachusetts, but America, until she lay at his feet. And Lord Hillsborough informed the king that he must clip the wings of his American turkeys in Virginia, that with their high and foolish notions of freedom and liberty, they begin to roost too high in the trees. He thinks it is time to remind his lordship that if he disturbs too much his birds, he will lose their eggs for his puddings. My friends, our governor has spoken to us just now of the king's justice being served. But I ask you, since when is it British justice that the whole of Massachusetts is punished and all her people made to suffer because a handful of men broke the law? We now see that this attack on Boston is an attack upon us all. And if British ships of war can so easily make their way to Boston Harbor, how little time might it be before they find their way to Chesapeake Bay? Decisive action is now required that we might demonstrate our determination to defend our rights as free-born Englishmen. Citizens, your Burgesses, I do beg pardon, your former Burgesses, have agreed that we will not tuck tail and run, but instead will assemble tomorrow morning at Raleigh Tavern, and there we will draft a protest. We will make an association for some measure of non-importation of British goods, but, more essentially, we have now agreed that we must call for a Congress of representatives from all the colonies to meet annually to protect the united interests of America. We should be kept apprised by way of the gazettes. Good day, friends, and God save Virginia!
As an example. While we're waiting to go in, I'll just mention that the first Capitol was built with no fireplaces, no heating at all so that it wouldn't burn down, which worked for 42 years. And then in 1746, somebody was sore that Bonnie Prince Charlie lost, so the following January they burned the building down. Took care of that one. The second Capitol was built on the same foundations, probably with many of the same bricks, again with no heating, so it survived the Revolution, survived 1800, then they added fireplaces in 1832. It caught fire accidentally and burned down. So this was a vacant lot for about 100 years. On the other hand, I suppose you must have some interest in government or you wouldn't be here at all. So I will proceed on that assumption, and if you have not, then I do apologize. This, by the way, is the chamber. When the voters sent the elected representatives from the counties, the Burgesses, the ones from each city, when the professors from the college sent their representative to the government, this is the chamber here in Williamsburg where they met and debated your rights, your life, liberty, property, tax law, slave law, tobacco regulation, a pension for a war veteran, highways and so forth, all of it. In any event, 5 weeks ago, back on May the 6th, there were about 25, about as many as you are, just a bit more. They come in, as the law said they must, and waited to be called into session as a royal government. But of course, the the King's representative, the royal governor, was down in Norfolk 5 weeks ago waging war against us. so he was not here. So those burgesses sat quietly for one moment respectfully, and then they simply let royal government in Virginia die. They didn't raise a hand to it, they just let it expire. So they rose silently, they filed out silently, and that was an end to English authority in Virginia. In any event, right away they were joined by about 75 or 80 elected delegates. Together they come back into the chamber and filled it as the 5th Virginia Convention. They've been working for your interests ever since. They raised some regiments straight away. Oh, and the women will likely be pleased to hear that they ordered for the local making of salt, since we cannot import that from the islands just, well, in the foreseeable future. In any event, a few days later, they voted us an independent commonwealth. You likely already know that. Now we all know that old Dutch saying, by uniting we stand, by dividing
We fall.
we fall. So Virginia has declared itself independent, but we cannot possibly stand without South Carolina, without New York, without Massachusetts, just as they could not possibly stand without us. In any event, a motion was sent up to the Grand Congress, and we're still waiting to hear back on that motion for independency. But the very next thing that they did back on the 15th, they said they wanted to ensure that what we're going through now never happens again. And what I mean by that is not the bloodshed that started up in the north last year, and of course there's been the Battle of Kemp's Landing and Great Bridge, and then half of Norfolk is in ashes down here in Virginia. But not only that, but for the last 10, 12, 15 years, Parliament has been trying, bit by bit, to take away our rights and liberties, and it's all been with the permission of that tyrant George III. And we've been protesting all of that time. So to ensure that our liberties are set forth plainly, the delegates called, even before the frame of a government, they called for a Declaration of Rights. For example, if you ever want to know in the future whether it'll be all right to search a Virginian's home without expressed and probable cause, there doesn't have to be a decade of legal contest. There doesn't have to be the bloodshed we're facing now. All you have to do is look into the Declaration of Rights, and you can't. It's the old law, man's home is his castle. You must have heard of that. In any event, so I just cite that as one example. Of course, this didn't exist a month ago. The idea existed, and of course they put it into committee. Everything goes into committee. And just under 2 weeks later, they came out with a first draft, which they recommended to the whole convention. And I may observe remarkably, before they entered into debate, they ordered that it be published in the newspapers. And of course the gentleman knows this already, but they also ordered that a broadside be printed, so that anyone who wanted to could purchase a copy of what they were planning on doing, inform themselves, and make their concerns known to their delegates before the final vote. And I say this and I point this out because I know of no time in history when Parliament ever done that, or when the burgesses, certainly here in Virginia, they've never done that, and I don't know about any other colony, but I've never heard of it. But this is not out of harmony with what they're planning. Article 2 tells you what kind of government they're planning. It says that all power is vested in, and consequently derived from, the people. That magistrates, those are the leaders, are their trustees and servants, and at all times amenable to them, meaning the people. And just so you know, those aren't just words. Article 3 says very bluntly that government is supposed to be for the good, and if the government's not good, it's the right of the people, not subjects, the people, to amend or overthrow it if necessary. Article 4, no man or set of men deserve any special privileges apart from the people. So you see, what they're conceiving is not the government of a king, and let me gesture towards a good king, George II, who ruled faithfully for 33 years. It's not going to be a sovereignty of one man. It's not going to be a sovereignty of a pack of men like lords. It's going to be a sovereignty of the people. They mean that, in any event, and I can see I'm boring the ladies, so I'll leave off the subject. But that's what they're doing, and we've heard back from folks. Article 1, actually, that didn't escape the first morning before they got in debate on that. In the first draft, it started, all men are born equally free and independent, which sounds well on the face of it, but do you see what the problem with that is?
Slavery.
How are you going to keep your slaves? Mr. Nicholas stood up and he said, slaves are all born, half of them are born to be men. You say all men are born equally free and independent, they're going to think they're free, then you've got insurrection on top of civil war and we're destroyed. In any event, and others looked at him like he was mad, but that was beside the point. After 2 days, they changed things so that in the final draft it says that all men are by nature equally free and independent, and it adds the clause, once they have entered into a state of society. The committee was 3 dozen. Well, of course, as I said, the Committee on the Constitution is the same men, so they are 3 dozen. That many men was very large for a committee, but deliberately chosen because the matter was so important. Protracting past the Mississippi River, right off the map to the South Sea. 200 years ago, during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, an explorer named Drake put his flag in what the Spaniards called California, but he claimed it as New Albion. And so the English crown has claimed everything from sea to sea for the last 200 years. Well, that's fine for 100 years, but 50 years ago, there were more Frenchmen and Spaniards living on the Mississippi than Englishmen ever set eyes on it. And so this was a vanity. This was not real. But that's what Parliament threw us into the war to seize. The Queen and ask for help. The right to peacefully petition the sovereign for the redress of wrongs, to use the proper expression. But you think about it for a moment. Do the people in China, do they have the right to go to their emperor and ask for help? No, they'll be killed on the approach from what I've read. Or what about the people in the Russias? Can they go to Catherine the Great and request assistance? It's not as bad as in China, but no, they can't. But again, we can. Well, we could. That was our right. And the point is, last summer when George III wouldn't even read the olive branch petition that was sent to him by the Congress on our behalf, he slammed that door in our face. He wasn't doing his duty as king, and that's what proved him to be a tyrant. Of course, just after that, he declared us in a state of rebellion as if we'd done something wrong, and all this time we'd just been protesting. But there I go. Actually, the reason we're not allowed in there at the moment is some men were treating, they were packing things up very presumptively, and they were treating that wampum like it was trash. Well, yes, by the way, I noticed as I walked up that there's a copy of the broadside that was printed 2 weeks ago of the first, the 18 articles. There were several hundred copies printed, but they've been scattered. In any event, this was the General Court of Virginia, the Colony of Virginia. It will be the General Court of the Commonwealth of Virginia. One of the whole reasons we're in the war is because we want to keep the ancient liberties. And so, for example, in the first draft and again in the final, it mentions juries in 2 articles. It mentions things like you can't convict yourself out of your own mouth, that you can't be subject to excessive fines and cruel and unusual punishment.
Where we are, there's a lot of different places, and some of these are real estates. Now this is the closest to autumn colors that we're getting right now. And as you can see, they come from a rather large estate. This is definitely farming and horse country. And we were commenting on this place. If you see all of the fencing, it cost a fortune. This is Toano, which is where we're staying. Very, very little town. These are the biggest buildings in Toano. Yeah. Looks like they tried to do a rendering of what Williamsburg looked like. This is the visitor center.
Yes.
in the booth.
I am stuck for lunch myself. Thank you very much.
I have no idea where she is. Could be anywhere. Will you be going into the cafeteria? Will you be going to the cafe?
No, here.
If I see her, I'll let you know. I'll let her know you're there.
Very good.
Good morning, Mr. Grimes. And how is your health today?
My father will come.
The cold bath seems to benefit you a little, Mr. Grimes.
You make free. Who are you?
I am Philip Barreau, visiting physician at this hospital, and I have been attending to you since May 12, 1795.
And who signed your permission? I never did.
I received my authority from the people of Virginia and the board of directors of this hospital. Mr. Grimes, the court ordered you confined in this hospital 3 weeks ago for cure of your illness. You have been a danger to society, threatening citizens of Spotsylvania County from the courthouse and in the streets and party.
Pretty big inventory.